Today's podcast is brought to you by Visa. With the capacity to process over 65,000 transaction messages every second, Visa has been bringing innovations to the way we pay for over 60 years. Imagine a world where, instead of just tapping to pay with Visa, you had to wait for everyone in front of you to cut a check. Everywhere you went. Imagine how much fun it'd be trying to track down your cousin in Milwaukee for league dues. That's why Visa's vision is to be the best way to pay and be paid everywhere, so you won't have to. Whatever your goals are, Visa makes paying fast and easy. The only thing left to figure out is, where would you like to be? Visa, everywhere you want to be.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. This right here is Nick Wright. We made it to Hump Day. We got to start out west, though, with the trade that we've all been waiting for. Former Jaguar Jalen Ramsey is headed to the Rams for 2 first-round picks and a 4th-rounder. Ramsey's been lobbying for a trade since his Week 2 sideline dispute with head coach Doug Marrone. Now, the Rams fill a hole in the secondary after Aqib Talib was placed on IR and after they traded Marcus Peters to the Ravens. CC, I don't know how no one saw this coming. Jalen Ramsey goes to the Rams. Where else is he going to go? It seemed really obvious. How could you play anywhere else with your last name? What did you make of the trade?
Absolutely.
Right?
We thought of the 31 teams, we thought the Rams were the leader. And based on the play-on names, you're right. But Jenna, this is about a young player that when Jacksonville announced that they were not going to extend him, and with these players, especially if a player's accomplished all you want, he's a top 5 pick and still playing like a top 5 player. It's not as if he did not perform up to what scouts thought he would be. Unique size, unique speed, the flamboyance to be able to play corner, the mindset to be able to give up a big play, but still to be able to shut down half the field. That's who Jalen Ramsey is.
He was not at all a different top 10 pick traded from the Jags to the Rams last year, Dante Fowler.
Yes.
A player who was taken in the top 10, never lived up to
Often
it.
injured, not available.
And so this was a guy who lived up to and exceeded whatever realistic expectations you had for him when you took him in the top 5.
And I don't want fans to think that Jacksonville, because this player was disgruntled, that they got really the short end of this deal. Jacksonville did well. Now, what they did was they stayed firm as if we're not going to trade him. The owner even said, he'll be playing on Sunday. I didn't think Jalen was going to play. Jalen's not a guy that would be bluffing, and that back injury was going to be something that they couldn't force him to get on the field. So I'm glad the general manager, David Caldwell of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he calls one of his buddies, Les Snead, and they work out a deal, because he had turned down deals for first-round draft picks and players that you would evaluate and say they have a first-round grade on them. But him and his buddy, Les Snead, they were buddies in Atlanta. There's 2 other first-round draft picks, not only Fowler, but the quarterback, but Blake Bortles. He's on the Rams now, too. So they'll join Ramsey and make it a little more familiar. But their ability to be able to work out a deal, they said they worked out a deal in an hour yesterday. People were calling, but once they had that hole in their roster, where Talib went on injured reserve and David Caldwell saw that they had traded Peters, he knew he'd be getting a phone call. And that phone call came immediately, and they were able to work out what I consider to be a great deal. The Rams are trying to win now. They have a new stadium coming. They need star players. They have that in Jalen. In Jacksonville, they have the picks that they coveted for the best corner in the NFL.
Jacksonville side quickly. This is the best you could do other than keeping the player. Much like the Raiders, the best they could do other than keeping Khalil Mack was get 2 first-round picks. The Dolphins, the best they could do other than keeping Tunsil, and maybe even better than keeping Tunsil, 2 firsts and a 2nd because of the desperation of Houston. So for Jacksonville, given the fact that even though Gardner Minshew's been better than expected, they're 2-4. They're in a division with 2 quality teams in Houston and Indianapolis. And by the way, I know they signed Nick Foles, but I don't think they are certain they have their quarterback of the future. Now they have 4 first-round picks in the next 2 years if they want to target a quarterback, if they want the ammunition. So if you had to move on from Jalen, you did well. For the Rams, it's a little trickier because the Rams added a star player and to a position of need in this regard. The last 3 weeks, this has been a terrible secondary. Now Aqib Talib, their best corners on IR. Marcus Peters, a player they traded a second-round pick for from Kansas City. He had some boom moments, but as has been the case throughout his career, a few too many bust moments, and there were questions about his fit almost emotionally within that locker room. They move off him. Now they have gaping holes in their secondary. So Jalen Ramsey adds a huge plus there, and now you could argue that they have the two best defensive players in football. You could make the argument. Now, I understand some people say edge rusher more important, but Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, that's the best D lineman in football, and a player going into this year was considered the best corner in football. That's the plus side for the Rams. The downside is they are building this team in a different way than any team in modern NFL history. They have not had a first-round draft pick since they took Jared Goff. No first-round draft pick in 17, 18, 19. Now no first-round draft pick in 20 or 21. They already were in a position where four guys, Goff, Donald, Gurley, and Cooks, were going to make up half of their salary cap for next season. They do not make this trade unless they are going to re-sign Jalen Ramsey. So now you are going to have the most top-heavy, talent-heavy at the very elite spots roster that we in the salary cap era that we have seen, at least from cap allocation.
Sure.
Can you make that work, and can you, with that type of roster, sustain the inevitable injuries that thus far this year they have not been able to sustain?
So that's definitely the question. But that model worked for them last year, getting all the way to the Super Bowl. Coming into this season, some talked about them as the Super Bowl favorites in the NFC. Do you look at them sort of more on that play now after getting Jalen Ramsey, despite where the record is?
Well, they're trying to stay in the playoff hunt. Right now, there are 3 losses in the loss column behind San Francisco. You can't think that with San Francisco having 11 games, the Rams having 10 games, Jalen Ramsey's going to be worth 4 more games in that short period of time. No. But moving forward, they also have a new stadium coming. They're going to have revenue not like anyone else in the NFL. So it's not like their owner, Stan Kroenke. You look at his bio, you'll know he's not hurting for money. He got plenty of money, and his wife got more money than him. So once they get into the new stadium with the new revenue, you can put a lot more money in signing bonuses than other teams could. So this is a model that we're going to have to watch. But they're in one of the marquee cities, Los Angeles, and now they have another marquee player. I think it's good for their brand and what they're trying to do. When you're in Los Angeles, you're just not in another NFL city.
Right.
Like, you are vying for people's dollar to entertain them. And that is, I would call, the capital as far as entertainment. The Rams, if they want to be able to keep with the Clippers, the Lakers, show business and everything, they're going to have to keep bringing in good young players to let this young coach continue to develop them. So if you want to stay a playoff team, I believe these are the type of things for, if you're the Rams in that type of market, that you have to move.
I understand that line, that argument, that line of thinking. It did, when I heard this trade, it made me think of something you said about the Browns yesterday, which is they're a team that if they're a house, they have a beautiful pool out back, they have a fancy car in the driveway, they have a big flat screen TV, but what about the foundation of the house? Right now, the Rams team is built on a very shaky foundation. We have questions about their quarterback. We unfortunately, I think, have answers about their running back, and their offensive line this year has not been able to sustain the turnover from last year.
That's your foundation.
They just added, maybe a Bentley in the driveway. I'm not certain if that was the best allocation of their resources. We'll see if they can pull themselves out of this hole.
This is the thing about the guys that they're paying. They're paying their best players on their team, who are some of the best at their position, and they're the best guys in the locker room. Jalen Ramsey hadn't been a problem in Jacksonville. No. Aaron Donald is not a problem. And if you look at the analytics to football, people are investing more in 2 positions right now as far as affecting the quarterback. Defensive tackle, because it's the shortest line to it, and pass coverage. A guy who can play zone and man. Jalen Ramsey, I don't know how much they're going to pay him, but he is worth every dime that they're going to pay him. Aaron Donald is worth every dime. So for me, the foundation of this franchise is based on those 2 players compared to Jared Goff. All right, because they're more talented, and to me, they are the leaders of that team. Goff just happens to be the quarterback.
And we didn't even get into it here. What this is going to allow Wade Phillips to do, what we have seen him do with a great shutdown corner defensively with the other 10 guys, will open up a lot of things for them.
Big news out of the NFL. Jalen Ramsey, no longer a Jaguar, a member of the LA Rams. All right, on to the Cowboys, where Jason Garrett's job security has been a focal point of late. A 3-game losing streak capped off by a loss to the New York Jets isn't really helping his cause. But with the Eagles coming to town on Sunday night, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones wants everyone to know that they are all in on their head coach.
I have felt that we've got a lot invested in Jason Garrett. He had a lot of years that he's been a part of the Cowboys, and he's evolved into what I think is a top coach. He would be a very sought-after coach if he were out here in the open market. So there's a lot of pluses there. He brings a lot to the table. I can genuinely say that that is not a thought that I'm having.
Maybe not now, CC, but how bad will it be if the Cowboys fall to the Eagles on Sunday and suddenly they're looking at a 3-4 record in a division where they easily could have been at the top?
Typically, when the Dallas Cowboys are struggling, one of the easiest things that we do is, let's fire Jason Garrett. But in the process of doing that, we forget who the owner of the team is and what type of team that he wants. Jerry likes Jason Garrett to be the coach because not only their working relationship, but how he handles the team. Because Jason Garrett, the one thing that I can say with the players that they've drafted and the free agents that they have brought in, they have developed these. They got some good young players that they have developed. Now, last year, they changed the offensive side of the ball. The defense has been pretty solid. So they go with Kellen Moore as the new offensive coordinator, John Kitna as your new quarterback coach. They changed the offensive line coach last year. So how long am I going to give this with my quarterback being his 4th year to be able to everything to build it come together in this offense to be able to function? So to me, the coach is not even in question. Even if they lose this week, even if they lose the week after that. Jerry Jones runs his business a different way. And every coach, even if he's a good coach, can't coach the Dallas Cowboys because he can't deal with Jerry and his son Steven on a daily basis and the optics that surround the Cowboys and the hype of the Cowboys every single year. You have to be a different type of person. Now, I believe that Jason, even though people think that they have underachieved, I don't think that they've underachieved. And when the players, his marquee players, are healthy, the Dallas Cowboys are a good football team. Now, people will say, well, these other coaches, they have backups in there. Who? Besides Belichick, and then we saw a man in Philadelphia do it 2 years ago.
Some people would say Sean Payton this year is doing it. No quarterback with Teddy Bridgewater.
Well, when you sign Teddy Bridgewater,
it's because you have more faith in him than almost any
so your
backup.
intel, your scouting department, the faith that you had him, you went out and traded for him from the Jets. So, you did do your homework. And it's about performing on the – I believe we criticize too much the coach in Dallas and don't criticize the players. And the players are the one not playing up to their ability, Nick.
So I don't think Jerry Jones is going to make a midseason coaching change. And if he does, it would be in December, week 15, 16, if the season is officially lost. I do think if the Dallas Cowboys lose this week in the Philadelphia Eagles, Jason Garrett is not going to be the head coach next season. Because if they lose this week to the Philadelphia Eagles, which would be their 4th straight loss, which would put them under 500 nearing the midway point of the season, which would put them in a spot where they have a bunch of... You look at how their schedule fell. First 3 games of the year against 3 of the easiest opponents imaginable. You get the Saints without Drew Brees. You get the New York Jets, albeit with Sam Darnold, but his first game back. Then you get the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that is struggling right now, just got crushed. You can't win any of those football games. That will, to me, be the last piece of evidence I need to be able to say definitively this Cowboys team, even if they somehow sneak into the playoffs, winning the division 8-8, 9-7, is not a very good team, is not a threat to go on a postseason run. And if that's how this season goes, they're not bringing Jason Garrett back next year. You can say he has not underachieved up to this point, and I think it's a decent point. But given the talent on the roster this year, if this team this season doesn't build on what they did last year, that will be underachieving. And it will be underachieving when Jerry Jones has no exit route this year, because it's either fire him or don't bring him back, or give him a contract extension. That's the other. Jason Garrett is on the last year of his deal. So if he is back next season, it is with even added security because it is with a brand new contract. So I don't think he's going to get, if they lose on Sunday, fired on Tuesday. But I do think if they lose Sunday, he's not going to be the head coach of the team next year.
I don't think the offense's performance this year will be blamed on the coach. All right? Michael Gallup was outstanding week number 1 and the first quarter week number 2. He gets hurt. We know both offensive linemen get hurt within a game and a half of each other. Zeke misses all of training camp. All right? So Amari Cooper now has been banged up for the last couple weeks after coming into the season injured. When you're there and you're looking at those injuries every single day compared to us just watching the games and everything, I believe that Jerry thinks that, man, if my guys were healthy, if they had a healthy starting lineup all through the board offensively, and they still had the same record, then we could have this conversation. But Jerry, it takes time. They got a new offensive coordinator. They've had changes all up and down the lineup. So for me, it still takes a little more patience with Jason Garrett as far as the offense and what they should be doing.
I have a question. Do you think that this 3-game skid and potentially a 4-game skid if they lose to Philadelphia will table any contract talks at all with Dak moving forward? We have not talked about that for a while. Remember, Dak is still on a downward slide almost.
Well, the whole team is, but no, I don't think it will. Now, it might make it to where Dak is more likely to accept whatever the best offer the Cowboys have presented is. But one of the reasons I think Jason Garrett is in such jeopardy if they lose is Jerry's not going to blame his quarterback. Jerry loves this guy. Jerry wants this guy to be the franchise quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys for the next decade. So
But he should be giving Jason Garrett some of the credit for developing him. If you love him, he didn't come in here developed.
Sure, but if he wanted to give him a lot of credit for that, he could have done that in the form of a contract extension this offseason. Whether Jerry said it or not, he made it very clear that Jason Garrett was going to be evaluated on this season.
And he should be.
Right, and I think that's fair. And the one question I have for you before we move on is, when you bring up the injuries, you mentioned how excited you are the NBA is coming around. I think in the NBA, if you have a team wrecked due to injuries, it's totally fair to almost throw the year out, not judge anyone poorly, because injuries in the NBA, other than the mild, the occasional ankle sprain, are somewhat outlier events. In the NFL, when there is a guaranteed injury rate, the question is just how high for every team. Isn't it fair, part of how you judge a coach, how well they deal with the inevitable injuries?
No, because you can't replace star players. Star players do too much of the bulk of the work for replacement players to do it. No. The star players in the NFL, if you lose them, there is no replacement. It's different when you got less moving parts. All right, you got a guy on offense and defense in the NBA. If a guy's not a good shooter, you bring in a shooter. Guy's not a good defender, you bring in one. When you lose speed, you lose reception, you lose blocking ability, it affects everything, the trickle-down effect. I got to protect my left tackle. I haven't had to protect my blind side for 8 years. Wow. Now my right tackle's out. So now even the game, putting it back to the tailback, the game I depend on, I can't even do that. Football is the ultimate team game. And when you remove one of those huge dominoes, that being a star player, it's impossible to replace their productivity. Now, we see a few coaches do it, but in the league, it is very, yes, do we get ready for injuries? Yes, but there is no plan to lose a star player. Look at the Chargers. They lost some star players. Have they recovered? No.
Hours before Ramsey was shipped to L.A., the Ravens pulled off a nice little trade for themselves. They picked up all-pro cornerback Marcus Peters from the Rams. That for a 5th-round pick and for linebacker Kenny Young. Baltimore's been dealing with injuries in their secondary, so they actually plan on playing Peters this Sunday against Seattle. CC, are the Ravens now the biggest threat to the Patriots in the AFC?
I wouldn't call them the biggest threat, but it is a need position. Jimmy Smith, their best corner, he's got a sprained MCL, so he looks to come off of injured reserve in a couple weeks. So they will have bookend corners. Marlon Humphrey, the first-round pick a couple years ago from Alabama, is playing phenomenal, but they've been inconsistent as far as who the other corner is. Their nickelback, your buddy, Brandon Carr, has been playing fabulous, but they've had 2 safeties injured and a corner injured. So it's a need for them. Baltimore, we went over the stats the last 20 years. They've been one of the top defenses. They have a defensive mentality. When he arrives in the building, he's a guy from Oakland, and Oakland is a lot like Baltimore. I feel he's going to be very, very happy with the culture there, the ownership there, Harbaugh, the way he coaches, their defensive coordinator, the way he allows their defense to be able to play a variety of different things. So he should be very, very excited after being traded 2 times in the last 20 months.
I don't know if it makes them the biggest competition in New England. I do think they already are going to present something to New England that's unique to any team in the league because of the mobility of their quarterback and not only their ability this year to play great defense, but to Chris's point, their history of great defense and one of the only teams in the NFL whose head coach can walk into a meeting during the playoffs and say, I have won in New England. I can tell you guys what it's going to be like and how to walk out of here successfully. So in all that, the Ravens already presented a unique challenge. I'm very curious what Marcus Peters they're going to get.
Yeah.
Marcus Peters was drafted by my hometown team
Chiefs.
and was traded by my hometown team, and I was beside myself when they did it. Through 3 years in the league, he had allowed a 65 passer rating and had 19 interceptions in 45 games with Kansas City. Now, he had disputes with coaches, ownership didn't love him, but he was an exceptional player those 3 years in Kansas City. A year and a half in Los Angeles has been a different story. A 65 passer rating allowed in Kansas City, a 100 passer rating allowed in Los Angeles when targeted. 19 interceptions in 45 games in Kansas City, 5 interceptions in 22 with the Rams. So what version of Marcus Peters are the Ravens getting? If he can tap back into what he was doing before he got to Los Angeles, he's an all-pro level corner. He was an all-pro corner early in his career. I don't know where it went wrong in LA because he had to leave across from him. You have Aaron Donald, you've got Wade Phillips. It just never clicked for him there. So it's not shocking that the Rams moved off him.
Do you think this will be a bit of a wake-up call for Marcus Peters, and maybe Harbaugh thinks he could do something more with him there, and that you talk about a better culture in that Ravens locker room, in that environment?
It's a different one than the one in Los Angeles. Who Les Snead is, who Sean McVay is, they're very, very different. Very nice guys. Les Snead, very clean cut. Baltimore's a rugged. They play to their fan base. They play to the way the team was made up with Ray Lewis. And I mean, they are trying to shut teams down. And I believe the way Harbaugh approaches players, Ozzie Newsome, he's still there as their general manager. They have a lot more players like Marcus Peterson in Baltimore. So I do believe he'll be a great fit in that locker room. Different coaches have different styles. The style in Los Angeles and what they're trying to do is totally different than what they're trying to do in Baltimore. Baltimore, it's about the players. It's about the culture. They have a great defensive culture when you go into the building. It's up to them because the reason why he's been a different player is because he hadn't gotten better, Nick. A lot of young players have success earlier in this league, but they can't sustain it. The difference between the good and the great, how long can you stay in your prime? How long can you be an elite player? How long can you be a Pro Bowler? How long can you be an all-pro player? His technique has gotten bad. He's not good in man or he's not good in zone right now. So at least in Kansas City, he was great at man-to-man.
Yep.
He didn't like playing a lot of zone, so he has to be able to work on himself, and that's what they're hoping in Baltimore. They can bring out the best in Marcus Peters.
And to your question about a wake-up call, you would hope so because since he came into the league, he has 24 interceptions. No one else has more than 16, and he is on his 3rd team and still playing on his rookie deal. So that level of production, even though with the last year and a half with the Rams was not very good, has not gotten a contract extension and has now been traded twice. Despite 24 picks in 4.5 years, that does speak to something that has been off with him. So you would hope he gets it right in Baltimore.
Yeah, take a look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the organization. Take a look in the mirror.
The Patriot way apparently does not include arguing with your coaches. Defensive end Michael Bennett has been suspended for conduct detrimental to the team after he had a disagreement with his defensive line coach on Friday. As a result, Bennett will miss Monday's matchup against the Jets. See, how surprising is it to see the turmoil within the Patriots organization? Because if it exists, we don't usually hear about it.
Oh, no, it exists, though. I mean, they got some edgy players. They got some players with an attitude who they've been able to coach up and bring out the best in them. Typically, it's about sacrificing about the team. Michael Bennett, he's an accomplished player. He has everything that you would want in a player. He's got Super Bowl championships. He's got Pro Bowls. He's made good money. He's had a long career. He has been a good player. So is he willing to sacrifice? When he went to New England, he was a different state in his career than most players. Most players like him have either some type of attitude problem, they haven't won, or you haven't gotten the best out of it. I believe that we've seen the best out of him with Pete Carroll. We saw him in Philadelphia still be an elite football player. But in New England, is he willing to sacrifice, which the defensive linemen there, they don't allow them to rush the passer as much as eat up blockers and allow the linebackers and the outside defensive ends to be able to get the sacks. Now, is he about that? I believe there's a number of philosophy differences. And Brett Bielema, he's a different guy. So I'm not surprised at who the exchange was with. I would have been shocked if you said, man, Bennett got into an altercation with Belichick. No, but Brett, I would understand that. He's got a little past history where he had a hard time dealing with people. He wore out his welcome at Wisconsin. He could have coached at Wisconsin for 20 straight years. That big offensive line run the ball, but there's some personal things there, so I'm not surprised at all. Every once in a while, they have these things in New England, just like other places.
I think the biggest surprise here is that it's a suspension and not an outright release, given the reports of what happened on Friday. And I know, Chris, we talked before the show, the Patriots don't like, he's a vested veteran, his contract then is guaranteed for the season, so if you outright release him, you're just eating the rest of that money. I would imagine that if this is something that continues, they might wait for the outright release, or they might wait to move on from him until after the trade deadline, because if you cut him right now, any team can grab him. And he is still a very good player. Maybe the Patriot fit isn't great right now, and certainly the relationship fit. We talked with Michael about going to the Patriots. The only real question I had was, and we didn't bring it up, was Brett Bielema. Because I know Michael Bennett a little bit personally and a lot from just reading about him and his brother. And I feel like I know enough about Brett Bielema that that's oil and water, and that's not surprising to me that that came to a head. But if they would have cut him, then the Chiefs or the Texans or the Ravens, anyone could sign him. If it's after the trade deadline, he has to pass through waivers. The worst teams in the league get the first bite at the apple, and the Patriots wouldn't have to worry about facing him potentially in the postseason. But he's frustrated that, I think it's what Cris said, you are asked to hold up blockers so other guys can go do their job. Your job is not the most glorifying one. And he played 11 snaps on Thursday night. And probably 11 snaps in a game that going into it, he's thinking, oh, I can get me a couple sacks. This Giants offensive line, that rookie quarterback, and instead Chase Winovich, the rookie out of Michigan, has got 4 sacks on the year. So he's frustrated with, I don't think the New England experience has been exactly what he thought it would be.
No, they're highlighting on the defense Jamie Collins. He came over from Cleveland. He's having an amazing year. Dante Hightower, anytime he's healthy, he's going to be highlighted on that defense. Cal Van Noy coming off the outside, and then you mentioned the rookie. Those are their primary 4 rush guys that they are dependent on to get pressure. Now, is his minutes? Because he's not a nose tackle. He is not a 280, 300-pounder can play over the center and over both guards. He's a guy that's got to play on the edge, and those 4 guys typically are on the edge. Jamie Collins plays more in the middle, though.
And so if they can get past this, he has as much raw talent as anyone in their front 7. Would you agree? Like, the only guys that would be close would be maybe Jamie Collins or Dante Hightower, but of their D linemen, when we were discussing how good this Patriots defense could be last week, one of the points you made, I think it's a good one, is they don't have elite talent on their defensive line. Elite talent in corner and Stephon Gilmore, and in the linebacking core. The one guy who does have, to me, elite talent on the D line is Michael Bennett. He
played 11 snaps last week.
Well, right, because that's the situational fit. And the Patriots are not going to bend that for anyone. The Patriots are not going to change what they do, particularly defensively, particularly when they are on a historic pace defensively.
If it doesn't match up with what they need.
To placate a player, and he's not a guy that his history says he's just going to shut up. His history says he is going to voice his displeasure if he is displeased.
And knowing that it's a 1-game suspension, it's not one altercation. There have been some problems there. And this right here, when you have to take a player away from a week, because you also hurt the team. You hurt that defensive line room. You hurt the linebackers and their overall productivity. So Belichick has been known to do some things in spite of what's best for the team. He did bench his best corner in the Super Bowl, and they did lose that game. So this is not that surprising to me.
According to Fox Bet, Patrick Mahomes is still the favorite to win MVP at plus 225, but Russell Wilson is now right behind him at plus 240, followed by Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers. Coach, I ask you still buying Patty Mahomes as MVP?
I thought we were going to be on video a little bit longer.
Right.
My apologies. Go ahead.
There's a lot of shenanigans that happen while I'm trying to work, as you can see. You still buying Patrick Mahomes as MVP with the way Russell Wilson's playing?
Yeah, look, I think that whenever you're trying to name an MVP this early in the season, it's kind of like putting someone in the Hall of Fame after a year.
Gotcha.
It's really hard to do because there's so much that still has to happen. But when you look at those two players, Russell Wilson does have the benefit of a better running game, a significantly better running game. I'd argue a better defense. But I do always consider it, if you took those two players and put them on another team in the league, what kind of impact would they have? And I think both those players, regardless of where you played them, regardless of what team you put them into, would have a significant impact. Do I think Mahomes has a chance? Yeah, and they're not losing because of him. They're competitive in those two games because of him. And he is a really, really good player, and I know I don't say that very much. But it's still too early to give him that distinction at this point.
To me, right now, through 6 weeks, Russell Wilson's your league MVP, and I don't know, because the way the NFL MVP voting works, not like other sports where you submit a ballot. It's around 50 voters, and they submit one name. And if you did award it after 6 weeks, I'm not certain there is a case for anyone to get a vote other than Russell Wilson right now. His team is overachieving, while I would argue the Chiefs are underachieving to a degree, even if we're not putting it on Mahomes. But that, not this most recent loss before, they only scored 13 points, and the offense really struggled to get on the field against Indianapolis. Russell Wilson is doing it without a true number one receiver. He lost Doug Baldwin last year. They just lost their tight end, Walt Disley, who came into the season with something like 150 yards receiving in his career, and Russell was turning him into something. We know they don't have a great offensive line, even if the offensive line is better this year than it had been in years past, and they've done it through a difficult schedule. So I think Patrick Mahomes has obviously, to Coach's point, because it's a long season, a very good chance to change this narrative over the next 10 weeks of this season.
But as it stands
right now, Russell Wilson's been the best player in the league. He hasn't made a tangible mistake. His team has been excellent every game of the season, aside from that New Orleans game, and they're doing it, I would argue, with not a ton of explosive talent around him, and he doesn't have Andy Reid calling his plays. I would argue having Brian Schottenheimer calling your plays is a very different circumstance for a quarterback to work under. So I think Russell Wilson's your league MVP right now, and I think he's separated himself from Deshaun Watson, Tom Brady, if people want to have him in the discussion, McCaffrey, and even Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, well, they're not giving out any awards. So for me, I have to predict what's going to happen the rest of the season. I don't think Seattle's going to win their division. So are we going to have an MVP that guy don't win this division? I don't think so. So for me, I think Patty Mahomes should be the leader because I believe they're going to have to produce offensive numbers. And he's going to have ginormous numbers.
Because of that defense.
The only thing, because of that defense, and the only thing holding Patty Mahomes back is the season he had last year. Because the numbers we knew before the season that they would suffer. Well, some of us did. After a couple games, Nick's like, okay, here we go, 60 touchdowns. He came back down to earth. But I believe the defense is not going to be able to stop people. That's not going to change. So they're going to have to put up big numbers. And his wide receiving core, I believe, will be healthier than it has been for the first third of the season. So for me with Russell, I don't think Brian Schottenheimer, I think that sometime when people call games, they get a bad rap compared to everyone's got a boss. Pete Carroll wants to play a certain style. So every offensive coordinator, we got Darrell Bevels. He's doing a pretty good job in Detroit. But remember when he was in Seattle, he was like, oh, man, that guy can't call plays. All these guys can call plays. The style for which they want to play in Seattle is a grinded out, so there's more pressure on Russ. He has less attempts. So I do believe that Patty Mahomes, Jenna, he should be the favorite.
And when you look at it, that commitment to the running game, it's not going away, and it helps a lot for a quarterback because it slows down pass rush. You've got a game plan to stop the running game. You know they're not going to go away from it. When you go to play Kansas City, it's all about stopping Patrick Mahomes. It's all about how you're going to slow down the passing game. It's not about what are we going to do to stop the running game. Not at all. It's dealing with him. So I give him some credit for that because he doesn't have the benefit of that commitment to the running game that Seattle does.
One note as far as Mahomes goes, Bill Barnwell dug this out yesterday. I think it's really interesting. There's 3 games this year where during the game he has aggravated or re-aggravated that ankle injury. Weeks 1, weeks 5, week 6. He broke it down for Mahomes in those games before the ankle got hurt and after the ankle got hurt within those games. Pre-ankle injury in those 3 games, he's 12 yards per attempt with a 141 quarterback rating. Post-ankle injury in those games, 6 yards per attempt and an 80 quarterback rating. So he comes in, it came into the season healthy, it was on fire. Jacksonville game first hurts it, after the game held on. Then the last 2 weeks, comes into those games playing very well, ankle gets tweaked and does not play as well in those games moving forward. That's something they're going to have to watch all year long because I don't think that's going away.
Yeah, an NFL player having to deal with an injury, that's crazy.
Yeah, sarcasm.
I'm just pointing out the numbers of the drop-off when it happened.
I had the high ankle sprain. Coach came back in 10 days, had 100 yards against the Giants in the first half.
Yeah.
Hey, we're back here with Coach Mangini. We're talking the big news from the NFL last night. Former Jaguars Jalen Ramsey is headed to the Rams. Coach, what did you make of the trade?
I think it's great for Jacksonville. I don't think it's great for the Rams at all. I don't really understand why you make the move that you do. So you figure they lost 10 years of cheap or inexpensive, potentially really talented players.
Explain that to us, Coach.
Well, 2 first-round draft picks. You get the fifth-year option.
Okay.
And there's 10 years. Plus you have a 4th-round draft pick, which could also be very good. So there's another 4 years. So that's 14 years. Then you traded Marcus Peters last year.
Wow.
For number 2, and you got a year and
5
games. So let's net that out to another 3 years. So now you're at 17 years. Now you're going to have to pay this guy a ton of money. So the players that you can't get with the salary cap space that you commit to him, and if winning right now is the focus, why do you move on from Marcus Peters? Why wouldn't you keep both those guys to see if you can improve the secondary as much as possible? Maybe having Jalen Ramsey with Marcus Peters could have been a good thing for Marcus Peters. I don't know how disruptive it was, but there's a lot of years of inexpensive, talented players that have left the Rams building to get a very high-priced player that then is going to eat up your ability to improve the team through free agency. So unless you truly believe this guy is going to make a difference in a way that
it's unique to the game.
Is unique to the game.
I can understand that,
It's
Coach.
hard to make sense of this trade. And look, this model that they have right now, at some point the bills come and due. And when you have high-priced and older players, injuries happen, things happen, and you have no space to replace them. So you may be good for the short term, but long term, is this going to be a team that can compete every year for a Super Bowl, or is it kind of the shooting star?
Now, Coach's opinion is totally different than mine, but he brings up some excellent points as far as there's tremendous pressure now on the coaching staff to be able to develop and find either free agents or low draft picks that have to, because ultimately these guys are going to get nicked up. So when you pay the premium for these positions, which they're paying for wide receiver, quarterback, running back, defensive tackle, and now corner.
Yep.
You can't afford for those guys to get hurt. So I do respect it. And his model has won more Super Bowls and been more competitive than I'm going to have a team full of stars, and then I'm going to try to supplement their ability just with people off the street. So I do respect what you're saying, and he brings up a great point as far as you have so many years of fixed cost. And when you're running the business and you can get fixed cost, that's been a model in the league that's worked for a long.
Fixed and inexpensive. It's relatively inexpensive. And I get the fact that it's still unproven. I'd also like to hear what happened with Marcus Peters. How did it go so bad that they wanted to ship him out for a 5th-round draft pick and a linebacker that had been benched in Baltimore? Things must have gotten really bad there.
Yes.
Now, is that surprising? No, there had been a track record of issues everywhere he's been, but it's going to be interesting to hear what comes out on that experiment. And now you go into this experiment, and Jalen's had his issues. When you empower a player the way that they've empowered him with that type of trade value and the money they're going to commit, he can pretty much do whatever he wants to do, and you have no recourse.
Well, you echoed my exact concern. I understand the attraction of you've got the best D lineman in football in Aaron Donald. You now add the best corner in football. You made the Super Bowl last year. Your pass coverage the last 3 weeks has been bottom 3 in the NFL. So you go out and get the best player available. I understand that, and maybe it works. But to add to your initial point, Coach, they've been doing this. They've been trading out these fixed cost cheap players for a while now. They didn't have a 1st-round pick in 2017 because they traded that to move up to get Goff. They didn't have a 1st-round pick in 2018. They traded that for Brandon Cooks. They didn't have a 1st-round pick this year. They traded that for Dante Fowler. Now they won't have a 1st-round pick in next year or the year after. So over the last 5 years, the earliest pick they've had was 44th, then 89th, then 61st, and over the next 2 years, unless they make another trade to acquire a 1st-round pick, will be somewhere in the 2nd round and the 2nd round again. Add to that, next year, Goff, Donald, Gurley, Cooks, $95 million against the cap. Now, the owners can be rich, but the cap is the same for every team. That's 50% of your cap before Jalen becomes the highest paid corner in football. Now, there's one little addendum I'll put to this. They didn't sign him to a contract extension, then one is not agreed to yet. I do think it is on the board that they do what I said a team could do that traded for Jalen Ramsey, which is you trade 2 firsts for him to have him for the rest of this year on his rookie deal, and then trade him yourself for a 1st and a 3rd, call it that, and recoup that, don't have to pay him, and you are really saying, we'll trade you a 1st for 10 games of Jalen Ramsey and a 3rd-round pick. I think that is in play here, but it has not been, no one's reporting that's their plan with Jalen Ramsey.
This is all moot if they go out and they win, because that's what they're doing, all of this, and they win now. Correct. Do they have, let's just talk about it, is Jalen Ramsey enough that they have a team that could now compete, despite where they are with the record, compete for the Super Bowl?
Coach.
Well, look, you know who's had 1st-round draft picks? San Francisco. And they put them all in that defensive line.
Sure, and look how well
that defensive line is playing really well. And it took a while because there's young guys, they have to fit in the system, and that's going to be a real problem. They're going to have that nucleus for a while, which is going to make this is going to change the division for them. Can they go out and compete with one? You move on from a starter, and another starter is injured, and you bring in a guy who hasn't played in a couple weeks, doesn't know the system, and I guess you can play cat coverage. Look, you go cover that cat, and we'll deal with everybody else. But even when you do things like that, you've got to move a lot of other pieces around to make that system work, and can they do it right away, and is going to have enough impact? I doubt it.
Let's talk about the devil's advocate side, if you will, on this. If you're Wade Phillips, listen, you've been a D coordinator and a head coach in this league just like Wade has, and we've seen Wade in the past with a great corner, what it allows him to do with the other guys on the defense. You talk about Ty Law like he's your 4th son. When you have a guy of that caliber, and I think Jalen is of that caliber, and you might quite disagree in the margins, but he is a great player in this league. If he can play cat coverage, if he can just say, I'm taking this player away, what does that allow Wade to do with the other 10 guys on defense that can demonstrably help the team?
Well, look, when Marcus Peters came out, he was one of the most talented guys I had seen since Darrelle Revis. So he had a ton of talent, and Aqib Talib has a ton of talent. So you've had some marquee players there. So for that not to work and to have to move on from that, it makes you a little hesitant to think you're just going to insert this guy and it's going to dramatically change. And look, as you trade away people and you pay the top end and you have that upper class, there's a bunch of guys on that team that are doing a ton of work that are getting paid this amount of money, and there's some resentment when that stuff happens too.
I think that sometimes that we get consumed with winning Super Bowls. I think owners and management, they're trying to compete. So you said, does this put them in position to win? Well, they just went to a Super Bowl. Now, how many teams or how many fan base would love to experience the success they've had the last 2 seasons? So Sean McVay, let's not think he's been doing this 10, 12 years. Him and Les Snead are moving along together. What if they get to another Super Bowl in the next 4 years? It'd be 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. I would call that damn successful. So can they compete in the division with Pete Carroll, with San Francisco? Because San Francisco's going to be around for a while. Yes, they can. That should be it. And once you get into the tournament, anyone can make it to the big game.
And they have been very successful, and it's hard to criticize it because of the amount of games they won, because of the things that they've done, because of the way that they manage the personalities. But ironically, in the Super Bowl, it wasn't the defense that was a problem. It was the offense that was the problem. And they've got a bunch of issues that they have to deal with there in terms of the offensive line. And look, we've talked about it ad nauseum. So it's hard for me to imagine that this one piece is going to be the piece that puts them over the edge. Yeah. Especially when you move on, you've got the Aqib Talib injury and Marcus Peters getting moved out.
On to the Patriots now. Yes, they're undefeated on the season. Also, yes, they're heavy road favorites against the Jets Monday night. But with Sam Darnold back in the fold after his stint with mono, and with the Jets coming off a huge win over Dallas on Sunday, Bill Belichick knows the challenge that lies ahead.
Sam's a very talented player, and we know that. And again, he's big, he's strong, he can make all the throws, short, intermediate, deep. He can extend plays with his legs. He's also a strong player that's hard to bring down in the pocket. He can shed tacklers and stay on his feet and throw the ball and still throw it accurately. He's showed good toughness last year and this year, going back to the opener against Buffalo and then yesterday against Dallas. So it shows good toughness in the pocket, and he's a quality player. It certainly makes a big difference having him on the field for him. There's no question about that.
Just for a little context and maybe some reference, Bill Belichick said some of the same things about Josh Allen a couple weeks ago, and then every single opposing quarterback before their game. He speaks very highly of them in an effort to maybe make sure his team knows that every single game is equally as important. Should the Pats, though, be worried about the Jets?
Absolutely. And one thing that Bill Belichick, to me, I love to hear him talk about players. People bang on him because his press conferences are awful. But when he gets into they are. But when he engages in a conversation, it's one of those rare things. It was like last year when we heard from Kevin Durant talking about basketball. Bill Belichick, man, sometimes he blesses us and talks about players, and he doesn't talk about this with every player. But the quarterbacks, if you look in particular, because he does pull out 1 or 2 guys a week that he feels like are players that have qualities that he admires. But all the young quarterbacks, from what I've been witnessing, when he plays against them, he has an extensive resume of what their skill set is, because Tom Brady's in the last years. Bill Belichick is recruiting quarterbacks every single year. So not only am I looking at quarterbacks, ultimately, Jenna, when they draft one in my division, that being Buffalo, the reason why he knew about that guy is because I'm going to be playing against these kids. So not only is he scouting them, but the guys that are in his division, he knows them like the back of his hand. So if you don't think Sam Darnold is the quarterback that he respects more than anyone in the AFC East, you are crazy. And you don't know Bill Belichick, because he knows right now there's one quarterback in that whole division that is a threat. And that happens to be Darnold with the Jets. And you could see in the film, when that kid is under center, they have a different personality. And if they were able to get C.J. Mosley back and a couple other missing pieces, yes, the Jets, they can scare a bunch of people. I do respect what Belichick's saying. I do believe that is the truth. He's not trying to just add hyperbole to the conversation.
Well, so we also have to remember, this context, which is Ryan Fitzpatrick, Luke Falk, Josh Allen, Colt McCoy, rookie Daniel Jones. Those are the last 5 quarterbacks the Patriots have faced. So even if you think he's blowing a little bit of smoke with Sam Darnold, he is without question the best quarterback they have faced this season, other than Ben Roethlisberger in week 1. So the best quarterback they have faced in a month and a half will be this Sunday against the Jets. Where the Patriots have been historically great this year is their pass defense. It's allowing 1 passing touchdown thus far this season. I think 15 interceptions now they're at this year. Stephon Gilmore playing like not just an all-pro, but a defensive player of the year candidate. Those linebackers doing everything they need them to do. So the Jets did show you last week, at least certainly in that first half against Dallas, they're a live team now. That one of the reasons Jet fans thought they potentially maybe could have the type of season Buffalo is having as maybe another playoff team out of the AFC East was the progression of Darnold. Now, I don't think the Jets are going to be in this position the Giants were in, where it's a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. But to be fair, I didn't think the Giants were going to be in that position, and I didn't think the Jets had any chance of beating the Dallas Cowboys. So I maybe am discounting the New York teams in general over the last few weeks too much. But there is an element of, you've talked about, the quarterbacks the Patriots are about to start facing, which is Baker, Lamar Jackson, Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
Just ascending degree of difficulty almost week by week. This gets them more prepared, not prepared, but more prepared certainly than Daniel Jones or Colt McCoy, Josh Allen, Luke Falk ever could.
Yeah, and I do believe those numbers are inflated, not only because the quarterbacks that they face, the bad teams that they face, the down and distance which they face, the deficits which they face, the lack of star running backs and wide receiver. You're talking about bad quarterbacks. If you look at all those teams New England's face, tell me the top flight wide receivers that they face. Tell me the big time running backs, the threat that they face. There haven't been any. So to me, I believe this defense was going to be good. I thought the secondary was going to be the best in the NFL, but they have not faced anybody. So those numbers, what do they mean? They don't mean nothing to me. But I guarantee you another thing Bill Belichick is watching. Greg Williams is the defensive coordinator of the Jets.
Oh, he gonna heat Tom Brady up.
And they coming after Tom Brady. So I believe that Sam Darnold will have an opportunity, just like the Giants were in this game, and just like I said for the Dallas game. Because when you have a quarterback, man, it sends confidence to every man on that roster that we can win. And we see it week in and week out, and that's what the Jets have in Sam.
There's a difference between being in this game and a legitimate chance to win. With the way you guys and Bill Belichick have spoken about Sam Darnold and the Jets' defense, and their O-line looked good last week protecting Darnold. Do the Jets have a legitimate shot to upset the Patriots?
Well, listen, they're going to have to turn him over. They're going to have to get to Brady like you're talking about, because even with Darnold being the best quarterback they've faced, I don't think the Jets are going to be able to score in the mid-20s as they did against Dallas. The question is, to me, for this game, what can the Jets defense do against a Patriots offense that I believe can be had? And can Le'Veon Bell flash? Like, you mentioned the best running backs and wide receivers they'd face. I'm going down the list. I'm like, man, Saquon didn't play. Buffalo doesn't have anybody that scares you. Miami.
That's why those historic numbers, this defense, I was like, man, throw them in the trash.
And Le'Veon wasn't great in the first matchup, probably because the Patriots went into it saying, Luke Falk's the quarterback?
Absolutely.
Okay, just Le'Veon's not going to kill us. They would need Le'Veon to have his best game of the season and the defense to get to Tom Brady repeatedly.
Look for Adam Case to move Le'Veon Bell outside the backfield and one-on-one routes now with those linebackers.
With those big linebackers.
Absolutely. Let's not play them in a phone booth. Let's get out on the playground and play a little pitch and catch. I believe that'll be part of the game plan.
The Nationals took down the Cardinals last night 7-4 to complete the NLCS sweep, so they'll now face the winner of the Astros-Yankees matchup in the World Series on Fox. Nick, what's up? Are the Nats for real?
You beat the Dodgers.
What happened?
You then sweep the Cardinals. You got to take them seriously.
At some point you have to.
They make the first World Series franchise history. Now, sadly, only the Mariners, last team remaining Major League Baseball not to ever make a World Series. Listen, I'm biased on this one. I am so thrilled the St. Louis Cardinals and their fans that cannot get out of my Twitter mentions. They're done for the year.
There you go.
Be gone, St. Louis. And so the Nationals, though, going to be able to rest up and have their pitching rotation the exact way they want it. Scherzer, Strasburg, going into the World Series against either the Astros or Yankees. One hell of a week for the Washington Nationals.
Jenna, tell of two different seasons. During the season, could they rely on their pitching? Nope, relied on their bats. In the postseason, got that bullpen figured out, got exceptional pitching. So this should be a phenomenal World Series. Cinderella facing one of the baseball giants in the Astros. Nick would consider this last 3-year run they've been on one of the best ever. And then we know this young Yankees team, after winning 103 games during the regular season, we're guaranteed of a great series.
All right, speaking of, let's talk some ALCS. Astros beat the Yanks last night 4-1. In the Bronx to take a 2-1 series lead. Crucial game 4, weather permitting, tonight on FS1. See, can the Yanks get back into this series?
Well, last night they missed an opportunity. Even though they're facing probably the best pitcher right now that we have, they had an opportunity with the 5 walks. They had opportunities with men on base. They could have gone for one of those long balls that have carried them the last couple years. Weren't able to get it done. I believe it's a must-win now in game number 4. Their pitching is not going to be as strong coming down the stretch for Houston, so Yankees got to get number 4 done, and I don't believe it's going to happen tonight because of the rain.
I think it speaks to how dominant Garrett Cole has been, that he went 7 shutout innings, and he did not appear to be sharp at all. I think the Yankees are fine. They were supposed to lose last night. Tonight, game 4 does become a must-win. One interesting note about this series, though, there was a ball last night, late in the game, that looked like a 3-run home run to give the Yankees the lead, and it died right at the right field fence. In the regular season, with what appeared to be the regular season balls, that's a 3-run home run. In the playoffs, it has not been. That has not benefited the Yankees in this series, and so it's something to watch as it moves forward. But the Yankees are fine as long as they win game 4. For the first time all year, the Yankees face a must-win game tonight in game 4.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.